looms.
Cool.
We all know the best comments come during recording anyway.
True that. So to refresh your memory, Rob, we were reviewing the epic for group level merge request approvals, and you had called out like, hey, I still am kind of confused as like what is happening in terms of like the inheritance logic behind what happens if something is triggered and it's at the instance level and you pick a compliance framework, what happens to the groups and projects? It's kind of hard to convey it just through screenshots alone. So I think the intent of this was to clarify some of those gaps, and then maybe we even spend the time refreshing perhaps the description to make sure it's clear for everybody else. So what I pulled up on my computer is I have the issue open. I've also got the Figma screenshots and some examples from GDK in case we needed to jump into it. But the first thing that I was trying to show was the basic like progression between the three. So instance, group, project, ignoring subgroup for now. And I realize this one is only focused on groups, but I think it's important to know like what happens at the instance level will trickle down to groups, and it already affects projects. So today, if you go into the instance and you check one of the boxes and you don't specify a compliance framework, nothing happens to your SOC 2 project. So hypothetically, if you go into a group, configure some setting, it's not going to necessarily inherit anything. But as soon as like they start triggering these, then I think it would start influencing the group and project. That may not be like the best logic, and maybe this is where you can help push back and help me understand how we can maybe make this a little better. So in this scenario, nothing is checked. Everybody's just kind of doing their own happy thing, and it's okay. In this next one, we've picked SOC 2. And so now that puts any group below in that instance into read-only mode, and it's going to inherit these sensible defaults that have been configured at the instance level. So there is an example of a project that is a SOC 2 project. It's inheriting from essentially the instance. And additionally, like you could add an additional approval rule, but you can't mess with the ones that were maybe configured at the instance level. So that can be inherited down, so which is why it's being inherited from the instance and group level. I'll pause there and see, like, does that track? Does that make sense? I think the trickiest part is like, when does a group inherit something because they don't have labels?
So just to be clear, if someone doesn't select a compliance framework, sets a bunch of settings and presses save, what happens? Do all projects get these values or none?
Nothing. Nothing happens. Today,
so why do we allow them to save the changes? If so it makes no effect, because the blue title, the blue alert box tells me if I want to set defaults, use a compliance framework. But surely the reality should be that we just don't have that, and we make it a requirement that they select a compliance framework.
Right. So what I was trying to express in the comment was, I'm trying to help reflect, like bridge between what we have today, and today is we allow them to submit the form. So without breaking that logic, still allowing them to submit the form, yeah, it doesn't do anything. So, I mean, we can even test that ourselves if we wanted to. But as far as I've noticed, if you have no label assigned to your project, or if you have a label assigned to your project and you're at the instance level and you configure something, it doesn't go, like it doesn't inherit anywhere. Matt, is that right?
Yeah, so I think I'll look for it while y'all continue the conversation, but I know that I raised that question with Tan during the initial implementation of part of this, and I forget the rationale why we decided to go with that for now, but that's not the intended long-term experience.
So my guess is, so then you can revert out of it, because otherwise there's no way to unset these values. if that makes sense. So once you've set if you don't have a compliance framework set, if you've stopped them from setting of no compliant framework, then there's no way for them to turn it off if you've made a mistake or you were just playing around. So my argument here would be to have some kind of reset or button, a separate action. So you either have to select all, or you can clear the compliance framework requirement entirely and have two separate actions. That removes the confusion I'm having around that text, rather than trying to figure out what that text should actually say to convey it in a easy to follow process.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I think why I nixed that was it was already difficult enough to try and improve the existing logic and introduce just like the idea of inheritance across the layers. So to me, what felt like the simplest thing to do first was just use existing logic, expose attributes at the group level, and additionally add in the approval rules. This would be a separate, and this would probably be a separate epic, but introduce those into the instance level, just to have some parity between the three layers.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be clear, the reset button would basically do what clearing all the frameworks does now. From a code point of view, the logic wouldn't change. It would be a front-end visual sort of change we'd do to get that distinction, I guess. That would be, that's my main suggestion on it, rather than necessarily the flow. I think the flow works.
So you're saying like make this field required, but you could have like a clear, I don't know, reset to nothing button essentially?
Yes.
Or unrestrict or something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think one of the things that Tan and I talked about, and I can't find the comment, but I'll keep searching, was when somebody's like the compliance framework selection field is maybe inactive or read only until one of those three checkboxes is selected, and then at that point it activates and it becomes required to select at least one of those frameworks. But then you could do like the reset thing after to say no, or just like uncheck the boxes to make it read only and not have the compliance framework or any of it apply at that point. I don't know if that's more complex, but that was, I think, one thing we talked about.
Well, that doesn't necessarily make total sense, because I mean, this logic doesn't totally hold up, but you might want to require that prevent approvals of merge requests by a merge request author be unchecked. So then it doesn't, like, I might actually want this to be what I require. It's kind of illogical, but this I maybe want all these things to be unchecked, and I want that to be what all of my things abide by. I don't know why you would do that, but maybe an instance where someone might want to do that is if they introduced their like exception label and they don't want to care about any of the rules. They just want to give them free reign.
So I mean, that's a valid point. Given the context, I cannot imagine a single scenario where they would do that. And if they want to go the exception route, like maybe we bake in some toggle on the label itself to say, if this is enabled, ignore, inherited things. But then it's like really easy to go in this circle where we're like adding more and more toggles that undo or do the inheritance thing. But I mean, valid point. So I'll yield to y'all on the implementation.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll reinforce my stance. I thought the simplest thing was use today's logic, reach some feature parity at the different settings levels, improve the logic after that.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that.
Okay.
One last wrench to throw in all of this. So we were, I think you had proposed, Austin, like, let's implement this at the instance level. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. And said, oh, but I was reminded we're supposed to do group level first.
Yeah.
Now been given clarity on that, and it's okay for us to start with instance level, provided we say why. And I think the why here is that the working group around simplifying groups and projects adds an element of uncertainty that at least at the instance level, it's most likely not wasted effort, whereas at the group level, it is most likely wasted effort. So I'm not sure, I imagine that affects our path forward to some degree, but I think it's probably safest to start with the instance level, knowing we can expand to group level.
Yeah, and I think some of the proposals that we had in mind at least make sense to start with. So like I just hid the approval rules just for the sake of showing like this is kind of how it is today. This is what instance level would look like. This is what project level would look like. You could just put an X through the group for now. And all we really are doing is introducing some quality of life things, like improving some of the UI text so there aren't like opposite checkbox behaviors happening, trying to clarify where these read-only settings are being inherited from. So I think a reasonable addition would be to add in the approval rules at the instance level, because then at least we would have project and instance matching, minus the like new things they added, which are the vulnerability check and license check. But
yeah, so I agree with all of that. And just for clarity and alignment, I think what I'm understanding is, I think we agreed to go ahead and start with instance level since that's less likely to be wasted effort on our part. Is that right so far?
that's what makes sense to me, but it isn't this epic. So I don't know if that means we would need to, I don't even know if we have an instance level epic right now.
We don't, but maybe what we can do is just repurpose this one for instance level and then create a separate issue or epic to say like, here's how we're going to expand it to group level and here's why we're doing this in this order, right? So like I can handle that change. So that's one. Two, the UI text or copy improvements, general experience improvements to make things more intuitive. Add the approval rules, and then I think the fourth most important thing is fixing the inheritance quirk, where like at the project level, they should be able to add additional rules, and right now it's just totally uneditable.
Right.
And actually, fifth, I just scheduled the issue to allow only admins and group owners to modify the project compliance label. And that'll be important because otherwise a maintainer could just go remove that, do the changes, and then add it back. Whereas if we fix those last two things, admin sets the rules, project inherits it, maintainer can't remove the label, but can still add additional rules if they want. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, everything until the last point. It's such a weird one because then it is like, well, now I'm creating a project as a maintainer. I want to abide by my company's SOC2 instance level rules. I can't add the label. I now have to call up my compliance manager to come add it to my project. So that's the only way it doesn't make sense to me, but also
That's
like
fair.
it is technically a workaround. Do we care more about the workaround, or do we care more about giving the maintainers flexibility to add and remove the label? I don't know.
So I mean, do know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
Could you not? Just to say, could we not just have a group level select checkbox to say whether you allow compliance labels to be changed by project owners? Would that not be the best change? And then it's up to group owners to make that decision individually on an individual basis.
I'm sure that's an also thing, because yeah, Austin's point is valid, and the feedback I received from the customer I spoke to, I think it was Monday, they said that what they would prefer in terms of the labels is to have, because I mentioned the two-person approvals we were working on, they're like, oh yes, we want that. And so I think eventually the future state would be maybe let maintainers set it, like give them the freedom to do whatever, but then to change it, we maybe add in that approval process to say like, oh, I want to change this from SOX to SOC 2 or like from something to nothing. And like they have to have a group owner come in and approve that change. And maybe that's how we get around that, if that's possible.
It does it even, Does it even matter though? If we're going to give the ability for the project maintainer to be able to add an additional approval rule, like in this mockup, the add approval rule button is there at the project level, and it's not right now. I mean, that's really the only thing that they can use the workaround for would be right now to add approval rules. Because right now I have this thing locked down. I could technically turn it off, hit save, and then, I mean, I could check these other boxes, but they're going to go back to what it was.
Well, but then they could delete the inherited approval rules right now, right? Because one of those checkboxes at the instance level removes those buttons to edit and delete the approval rules, or it should, I think.
Only in a merge request.
Really?
I'm pretty sure it's what that's intended to do.
Yeah,
that
the instance
which is
level settings are just for merge requests.
Well, but wasn't there an issue where the project level was uneditable also? And I think that's what spawned an issue to make that editable.
You mean, yes, that's the problem. We're also blocking approval rules on the project level,
Well,
as
see,
well as
here, like, see on the far right, those buttons are gone now that you've enabled it.
yes, because the rule is being applied to both the project and the merge request. When
Right.
the flag is the checkbox is only for the merge request.
So what I think I'm understanding is okay. So what I'm saying is right now maintainers, if they say, oh, I don't like these rules, they'll just go remove the label on the project, delete the rules there because they can now do that, and then reapply the label to get around whatever. Like they might add additional rules when they remove it, right? And what I'm saying though is, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I think I have an answer for your concern.
Okay.
So today, if we match the existing behavior, I could take the label off because the only thing that we have parity right now are the checkboxes. I can change the checkboxes, but as soon as I put the label back on, it goes back to whatever the instance has set for that compliance framework. In theory, I would think, take off the label, delete the inherited things, put the label back on, and it's going to now pull again the things that were set at the instance level, and I can't touch those because they're on read only. I can add new rules, but that's it.
So today it's a problem because we don't have the actual approval rules at the instance level, but in the future, the changes we're discussing here, it'll be a non-issue because I could just remove the label, delete stuff, but when I reapply it, it'll just add them back.
Right, yeah. Because you'll be able to actually put them at the instance level, whereas like today, really the only way to do it is to like go into a project, create these rules, then they're locked down, but that wouldn't make sense for where you want to add them.
There is one hiccup, and that would be that
there always is.
This is fine.
A project owner can remove the compliance framework, change their approval rules, go to an MR, merge their MR, then put the compliance label back. They technically not.
There you go. There's your exception. Yes, you could do that.
So
which would completely break their compliance, and auditing would be hell.
Yep, that's true.
And so that's where we come back to, like, I agree, making owners and admins the only ones able to modify the label setting is probably not the best long-term solution, but it might be the best short-term, maybe. But then maybe instead we just work towards adding two-person approvals to that setting or something. Like there has to be some mechanism in place to control that. Otherwise, the label mechanism is just easy to bypass.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, because you want to give them the freedom to like inherit the rules so they can play by the rules. But you don't want to give them an easy backdoor. Huh.
Well, and the other thing too, right, is we talked about how we could work towards the future state of the labels where in the customization process, you point it to a project template and have it create. So if you wanted to say, oh, I want to create a SOC 2 thing as a project maintainer, the group owner should create a label that points to or references some SOC 2 project template. So when the project gets created by the maintainer, but then they can't apply the label right.
Okay.
Well,
So
hold on. That's actually a good idea. That doing the whole, we're eventually looking to have some kind of YAML set up where you're able to pre-configure project settings. Having that would mean that if someone creates a new project, it would automatically apply the correct compliance framework, wouldn't it?
Oh,
You
yeah,
could
because in
say,
the template, you could define the label as the group owner or whatever that maintainers could then use.
Yeah, which solves the problem in that case. There's always a case that someone could create a project with no compliance framework at all, but then that's done to a compliance group owner process of keeping an eye on those sort of projects, isn't it? More than something we can necessarily control.
Yeah, and then there's an issue that I think I just removed from Next Step because the import group is working on some improvements, but it was to enforce project creation from templates. So you could maybe go that route and say, this group has to create from this 1 or 2 or 3 templates, and they're all like SOX, SOC 2, and HIPAA maybe. It's like you can only create a project from one of those 3 templates. So that's one way to go about it as well. So I think maybe what we have to figure out is like, what is that threshold we're willing to tolerate for now from the UX side, and say like, this is good enough. Well, we know there's friction here, but then here's like our path out of it.
I guess my short, narrow-minded view is I'm okay with the workaround being its own thing that we try and address separately, whether that comes as this resolution through project templates or something different. But we also have the compliance dashboard that would tell you if someone essentially did take off things and did things without, let's say, using 2 different authors and approvers, because we flag that under the approval status if it didn't abide by separation of duties. So technically, we do provide a way for the compliance manager to audit whether the events that are going on are actually meeting their standards. Not perfect, but I mean, like, there is a way to at least catch it.
Only the last MR though.
Well, Rob, don't
at the minute.
Don't even start with me.
No, I completely agree with you. At
You're
this
right.
point, the compliance dashboard is not it's not recording violations on a long-term basis. We are literally just taking the last MR. We're not doing some kind of holistic review for you. It'd be great to get there, but we're not there yet.
And then this is where your prototype, Austin, for the chain of custody comes in, which I think is what they would need. Yeah.
Right. So there you go. There's our path forward with the UX. We have ideas in place that are going to help resolve these things. But we're getting close to the 30-minute mark. How are we feeling?
Yep. So I think what would be helpful is I can I'll figure out in which epic or issue, or maybe just create one to outline what we've talked about and my understanding of what we think the path forward is, which I think is, let's solve for this instance level merge request approval setting thing. So let's do the group level epic, just convert it to instance epic and do that. And then we'll detail like the next steps to follow, ideally in consecutive milestones, so that we're not leaving customers in the lurch for like 6+ months, to say that, we'll use some combination of these custom labels, some maybe enforce project creation from templates, using templates themselves to predefine the use of the labels and also the settings that correspond. But yeah, I'll put that all in some issue somewhere so that we can at least keep track of it and then follow that roadmap.
Cool.
Yeah. For me, great. It's been really helpful in understanding the final flow, and I agree with everything you all have said. It'd be great to get Mike or Alex, Mike's going to be on holiday next week, to get their view on the UI text.
Yeah.
If we're keeping that top level alert, it'd be great to get their opinion on how we can improve that to make it as clear as possible. It's better than what we have currently, which is have luck, good luck, have a good guess. So, but I think we can get an easy win on that one.
Yep, I would love to get their feedback in case they're watching this on how we use the alert to tell the user what's about to happen if you use these settings. Additionally, the current language for this unique attribute is confusing. And the reason why it's confusing today is it shows up as prevent users from modifying merge request approvers list at the instance level. And it shows up as can override approvers and approvals required per merge request. So to me, those things were non-obvious. So I rewrote it as allow users to modify approvers when creating a merge request. Because I believe that is what it does. If I'm creating a merge request, I can edit this list within the merge request.
It also affects the project level at the minute too. So that's where the biggest confusion for me lies. So we're saying merge request only, but in fact, you can't add new rules or delete rules on the project level either.
Well, but project level is read only no matter what. So it's not actually doing anything to the approver's rules. No matter what I have checked there, this guy is just going to always remain read only. So it's not actually doing anything to the project level. It's just if you have a compliance label that is set at the instance level, if you're matching this one, GDPR in this example, it's going to be read only, which Mazar talked about. We're going to fix that. You're going to be able to add rules. But I think this behaves differently within a merge request, depending on whether or not this box is checked.
So you're saying that right now, if you don't have any of those boxes ticked, but GDPR ticked, you can't edit the project level?
No,
even though we've not said
you cannot
whether you want to edit them or not.
Let's see.
No, if no framework is selected, you can edit, I think, right?
See, nothing is checked. This guy is the opposite.
Oh,
so
sorry,
it checks,
you're talking the opposite. Okay.
And then it's it's all read only. So if I check
so
that one,
confusing.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time in dual windows just trying to figure this out. But I think I got it. I feel like I know it very well now. It'll still be read only. Yeah. And
we
these
really
guys
should
are
be making that super clear, because it means they can't actually do anything with approvers right now.
I don't know how anybody was able to actually write this in code, because man, that must have been such a spaghetti mess to figure out. I'm impressed anybody could do it.
You should see the mermaid diagrams, the number of them that were produced by 10 for this.
Yeah.
This was great. This was great.
Yeah, thanks for coordinating the call. It's clearly a very complex problem, but I'm glad we have a much better path forward. Just for context, there are a couple of customers who are either currently undergoing or have upcoming audits that they're very interested in this. And I've already communicated to them that hey, we've sort of paused development on this because we're trying to figure out how to implement this better. So we learned a lot of very valuable lessons from how we implemented it. Now it's time to do that. So I'll go create that issue, like I said, and we can maybe go from there.
Oh, I have one more question, actually.
Sure.
Okay. There are two settings that we don't have here, and that's this guy and this guy. Do we want to also bring those up? I don't have them in my mocks today. So do we want to just have complete parity, 5 and 5?
Like we should.
Okay.
Yes, please. Because it then means that eventually front end, we can literally copy and paste each of these components into each section and have one place where we make an edit, rather than the current situation where we have about 3 or 4 different locations.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. And the original intent with the 3 settings that are there now was meant to be an MVC and to expand it later. So yeah, we should.
It's worth saying quickly that I can see from a development point of view at least 5 issues / MRs to go along with this, if not more, to get this completed.
Yeah, let me open that issue and we'll talk async, but yeah, I suspect it's going to be more than that.
Weird flex, but okay.
Yeah. Cool. Well, can't wait to have Rob poke holes in the proposal once I've documented it, but really appreciate you throwing this together, Austin, and this was helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll upload it to unfiltered later today.
Cool.
Brilliant.
Thanks both.
Thank you, Austin. Ciao
welcome.
all.
Bye.